Quiet. Hello, I'm Steph Morrison from the Canadian Schoolhouse, and I am here today to talk about history. And I actually really have a great love of history, and I'll say my public school experience did not really, I didn't really know how great history was until after public school. And one of the things that is so great about homeschooling is there are quite a few different companies, sort of passionate individuals that really are creating great courses to teach our kids. And one of those people is Mike Zietsma from Creating History. And he has, he's going to confirm for sure, but he has 2 or 3 specifically Canadian history courses. And if that's one of the things that I see the most often on homeschool groups or asking on our page is just asking for good resources for Canadian history. So Creating History is definitely your place to go. So I want to welcome you to our video today, Mike.
Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate you making some time.
And this is great. I'm going to enjoy this just as much as anybody watching this because we're going to talk about history and how that there was actually a really when I approached Mike about maybe doing a live and sharing his history courses and knowledge, I noticed he had this quote on his Facebook page, and I got to try to get it exactly, but while creation confirms the existence of God, history reveals the need for a savior. And I've never really thought about it that way, but since I've read that quote, I've now it's been pondering. I've been pondering that, and so Mike's going to share a little bit about that. But first, Mike, what I want you to share about is a little bit of your background. Why did you start creating homeschooling courses? What's your background in teaching and as well as in history? And let us know a bit about yourself.
Great, thank you. So I absolutely love history. It's something that I teach, but I just love doing. And even in my free time, I enjoy doing things associated with history, like traveling. And one of my passions is creating resources specifically for history and other subject areas as well too in the social sciences. And so I've been teaching for, I think, 17 years now. It's gone quick. And along the way, I've really delved into deeper the importance of history. And quite often, you talked about your public school experience, and perhaps experience of people in the past with history is that, okay, it's just dates and facts. And the kids who can memorize stuff do really well, and those kids who can't, they struggle. And if history is simply left to the dates and facts, we're missing out on the true meaning of history. And so I really tried to get that across with my teaching. And I've also noticed too that there was not much in the homeschool market. And I started in 2012 creating courses specifically for homeschool education. My sisters and my brother, they all homeschool their children. And I saw a need for it. And I love creating material. And so that was a great fit right there.
That is great. Yeah, you can see that. So you got that firsthand knowledge of homeschooling families, for sure. And so I see that. And so you are a teacher. I mean, currently, right now, you are a teacher for schools as well. So you're teaching bigger groups of kids.
Yeah. So I've been teaching at King's Christian Collegiate in Oakville for 17 years. And I teach primarily Canadian history, American history, and European history. And I've taught civics quite a bit over the years. And I also teach phys ed, and I coach soccer as well too. So yeah, I try and do a variety of things that I enjoy. And I've really enjoyed teaching the kids and really just being with the kids and, understanding that each one of them are beautifully and wonderfully created by God. And that is one thing when I have a whole group of kids in front of me, I'm just in awe that, these are kids who are made and loved by God. And I really want to get through to them the importance of truly understanding history and The quote that you mentioned, that is foundational to how I teach history, but also who I am as a person. And I chose this quote originally for my classes, and I also have it for my business. And so the quote is, while creation confirms the existence of God, history reveals the need for a savior. So we're in the time of year now where Easter is approaching, and along with that, of course, comes spring. And we see all sorts of stuff starting to pop up out of the ground. We see crocuses, snowdrops, and they're all coming out of a seemingly dead environment, just out of winter where everything looked dead, and now everything is coming alive. And that's just one example of creation, but there's so many other beautiful examples too. And I've been fortunate enough to travel quite a bit around the world to just beautiful places, Switzerland, our own country as well too. And there's no end to how incredible this world is. And when we take time to actually see that, truly see that, we have to draw the obvious conclusion that there's a creator. Because those confirmations of a creator are all around us. And it's just a matter of us taking the time to actually see that. So that's the first part of the quote there. And the second part is specific, of course, to the importance of history. And so, as I mentioned, I teach a lot of history courses of different topics: European history, American history, Canadian history, and different other types of histories I've crossed over and I've learned about as well too. And what I see is that the good and the bad of humans is going to be revealed within every culture. And so we see the depravity of humans within every culture and people group throughout time to varying extents. There's no time frame in history where you can say that, such and such time frame, they got it all together. They fixed all the underlying problems of the world, and everything is perfect now. No, that's not accurate, right? Because through every generation, every time frame, we're going to see things like greed, revenge, selfishness, the quest for power, the abuse of power, and the ways in which those things are revealed. It's going to be different with every generation, but nonetheless, each of those things are going to be shown when we study history. And no earthly savior has come along and actually fixed the problem. And we have good people who have come along and made good changes. And one of my favorite people in history is William Wilberforce, who spent his entire life seeking to abolish slavery in the British Empire. And when he started, he was in Parliament with his bill. He was ridiculed, laughed at. And by 1833, slavery was finally abolished within the British Empire. But even somebody like William Wilberforce, even though he made such good changes, he's a human like the rest of us who faded away. And we still do have the exploitation of people in different forms happening in our world today. And so God calls us in our spheres of influence to do as we can with the abilities that God has granted us. But none of us are the saviors of this world. And we often look to an earthly savior to fix this world. But ultimately, it's our Savior, Christ, who will ultimately fix this world and save us. And so when we study history, we see those trends, that desperate need for a savior within every culture and people group throughout time. Everyone. And if history is just left to Vimy Ridge, 1917, D-Day, June 6, 1944, those are important facts, but that's not the end point. And it's the dates and the facts create context to look at things deeper. And when we truly look at things deeper, we will see that this world, and ourselves included, we desperately need a savior. And our present world is no different. So that's where actually the name Creating History came from. So if we look at the quote, while creation confirms the existence of God, that resulted in the creating portion of the name. And the history portion, history reveals the need for a savior, contributed to the second part of the name. So that's how creating history ultimately came to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love how you put those like those concepts together in your one word. And I think the first time that I noticed your company and creating history, and I love that because I use that that kind of word creating quite a lot, whether it's just being creative or about creating and anything we want new in our lives, we're creating something, right? And it's not often done, you know, because history is kind of traditionally thought or commonly thought all that the past, right? So all the stuff in the past. But I do remember hearing something before, and I'm sure it's a quote from somebody, and I'm not gonna get it exactly right, but one of the things I remember about the importance of history is that we have history to maybe not repeat the same mistakes of humanity. But as you explained, right, there seems to be this cycle, and even looking at the Bible and what God has put in his word, that we're, you know, he's put it there for a reason. We can see that cycle happening through all those years that the Bible talks about as well. So it's to see that your perspective there on that need for a savior and how history is something to learn from, but in some ways we're not learning. We're progressing in some ways, but I like that, and I'm still going to grasp my head around that. But being able to say that we can feel that deeper need for a savior because we know what history is, and history is kind of repeating trends, as you say, right? This kind of cyclical fight of good and evil. Like, does that seem like I'm kind of grasping your look on that?
I think we often think that, okay, something bad happened in the past, and we're often expecting the same thing to happen again in the future in this exact same way. But evil is very cunning, and evil is not stupid enough to do the same thing and the exact same thing as the past. Evil will find a new way to reveal itself, and it can sometimes take time. Quite often it takes time for people to realize what it actually is. And so if we think about something like the transatlantic slave trade, now the transatlantic slave trade is over. And we think, okay, phew, that's over. But the exploitation of people, that still continues in different forms. And particularly within a Canadian context, the place where the most human trafficking takes place in a different form is actually at Square One in Mississauga, Ontario. And in a Canadian context, there's human smuggling taking place and exploitation. And so, and it looks different. But ultimately, taking advantage of other people and exploiting them, the root is still the same evil. And sometimes that evil can be difficult to see because it becomes so embedded or hidden within society.
Right, because that's that little bit different, but still, especially how you talk about slavery, because slavery is, you know, I mean, even the Bible talks about very different forms of slavery over the course of all those years. But anytime since then, there's been slavery of different people because of their nationality, because of their social status, whatever it could be, right? Like there's a lot to do just to notice just on that topic, that it's not slavery has been a big part of our history. But you're right. That's kind of a neat concept that I can think on more, and I'm going to be able to relate that, I'm sure, to so many different other topics, right? Because slavery has been so used as evil in different ways.
Absolutely.
And then really the only one that can truly the only one that can truly save us from that, right, is Jesus. And even though we think we may be getting kind of right as humans, and we do sometimes, for sure, we kind of fall back into it.
Quite often when we look at different generations, we can see that, okay, this particular generation progressed positively, biblically, in this area, but regressed in such and such area. And
Mm-hmm.
and we can see that throughout time, but no generation has got it all together. And so inevitably, we always look back at the past and we judge the past. But we also
Yeah.
have to look at ourselves in the mirror as well, too, because we are equally as in need of a savior. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's important to remember, that the capacity of the human heart is the same both past and present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Um, when you are writing your history courses, specifically the history that we're using, that you have for homeschoolers, and so you are mainly doing I know you said one, and we're going to mention something in a minute of just a nice little a giveaway that Mike has for everybody. But so you mentioned that like maybe grade 8, but grade 8 and 9 is where your history courses are, in high school and above is what your courses are mainly for.
Yeah, so it's from 9 to 12. So um, the the Canadian Civics course is typically done in grade 9 and 10, and that's a half course credit, and it's technically an open credit, meaning that it's meant for every different type of learner. And then my Canadian history course is also
Mm,
done in grade 9 and 10, and that one is more academic, but it can be modified based on particular learning styles as well too. I try to create a lot of diversity in my resources. So when we think about
mm-hmm,
history, I really urge people not to think about their past experience and how history was just, memorizing stuff and writing notes. We're living in a time now where online there's so much more access to fun and exciting stuff, and in particularly primary resources,
mm-hmm.
map animations, and so on. So history can become a lot more real through using those different methods. So Canadian Civics, Canadian history, and then American history typically is done in grade 11 and 12. And then I'm in the works of actually producing another course, European history, from the 1300s to
Mm,
the present. And that one would be, again, for grade 11 and 12. And
mm-hmm.
so all those courses, they're available in a professionally printed workbook format with access to Google Drive. And on Google Drive will be all the narrated lectures and everything, answer keys for the parents, rubrics for the parents as well too. And so I'm also transitioning as well too to not only providing a workbook version of the courses, but now to provide a completely paperless and interactive version of the course through Google Drive, through Google Classroom. And so that's
Yeah.
actually soon to be released. And I'm really excited about that. And the way that education is done is certainly changing a lot and continues to change. And this is simply another
Mm,
option for parents that might fit with the learning style of their kids.
yeah. Uh-huh. That sounds exciting. I haven't done anything in Google Classroom yet, but I have heard other homeschooling parents doing that. And even so, those that are doing school at home, it's still doing it. That seems to probably be the most popular that way. But I know there's homeschooling options, like strictly
Yeah,
parents educating their kids options that are done through Google Classroom. So that's kind of cool to know you've got that option as well. Um, so let's go with a couple things. So one thing you mentioned is a free so that the one profiling a soldier. So why don't you tell us about that? Because I'm going to get it all wrong if I try to
sure.
repeat what you. But tell us what that resource is and how we can get that to our viewers.
Great. So as I mentioned, I've had the opportunity to travel throughout Europe quite a bit with students on different history trips. And that's been very meaningful. And, to stand at Vimy Ridge or on the beaches of Normandy, that's as real as it
Uh-huh.
gets. And its textbooks are great, different activities online are great, but to actually stand and try to think about what these soldiers sacrificed at those places, that's
Mm-hmm.
as real as it gets. So I remember I was at Vimy Ridge and I was walking through the cemetery there, and I saw all of these gravestones, and these gravestones, they would have a name on them, the regiment, and then the age. And a lot of them, their age was in around 18 or so. There's even some who were 16 who lied about their age to get into to the war. And there's many as well too who simply, there's no name, and it simply says known unto God. And so that was really the start of this project, where I saw that, well, these soldiers, they're largely forgotten. And they came from areas where you and I live across Canada. And now they seem to be forgotten. And so I really want to make an effort to not forget these soldiers. And so I designed a project for my students that required them to research a local soldier from their community. And so they had to start off with a name. And they could simply go to their cenotaph in town and find a name there. Each town also has an honor roll online as well too. And so the student task was to find a name, and then from there, they would start to figure out, well, who was this person? Who was this human being that ultimately lost their life in the war? And so nowadays, with everything being digitized online, we can find all sorts of primary records of soldiers. And so in the project, there should be a link somewhere in the comments section, I think, for the giveaway of the project. So you'll see a whole breakdown of this. But basically, starting with the soldier name, students can then research online to find out who the soldier was, and they can access the actual enlistment papers of the soldier online. So if you want to find Billy Bishop's enlistment papers from World War I, you can find them very quickly. And then you can find other things as well too, depending on the soldier. Different soldiers have different amounts of documentation with them. But I have some students who have found 300 pages of digitized military documents on their soldier.
Oh, wow.
And so there's lots online to access. And then there's also a lot of on-the-ground research that kids do with this project. So they visit the cenotaph. They can visit the local history section of their library. And I've had several students who were actually able to find where their soldier had lived in the town. And one soldier that a girl in my class had researched, he actually survived the war, and he had since passed away, but she found his grave in Oakville, and she found where his house had been. And she contacted the relatives to find out more information about who this person was. And she said to me, when she was standing by his grave in Oakville, she said, Mr. Zietsma, it was like I knew him. And that made it very meaningful for me as well too, that, you know what, you got it. You understood that, you know, we're not simply just collecting facts here. We're learning about that these were actual people who fought and died and survived during the war. And their sacrifices for us are why we are free today. And so this project really encompasses a lot of different things. It's a tough project. It's by no means an easy project, but it's a meaningful project. It's not a project where kids simply just collect information from Google and, okay, got some information, done. It's a project where they have to dig and dig and dig, and they hit roadblocks and they have to problem solve around that. And so they learn a lot of skills in terms of learning, but then they also, of course, learn about the human experience of war, much more so than a traditional project might provide them with.
I glanced through this a little bit, so I didn't get too in depth to it. But when Mike sent me just set that link up there that we just shared in the comments, for you to get. I looked at that, and although I've got my boys are 10 and 13, I'm like already thinking in my head like this is a great family project. So don't think that
Yeah.
just because this is something that is an individual, you know, for somebody that's in high school, it's a great individual project. Like I can just see me and my boys going down to the cenotaph or talking. I know a few people that had family in the war, and we've certainly been at several Remembrance Day things at our local
Hmm.
legion. So that's just like so. It's got so many aspects to it too. As you say, we can do some of that research online, but we really want that to be more real for us to know, you know what, we could maybe even talk to somebody that whether they happen to still be alive or that they have got family that they shared stuff with, and that's kind of like exciting, the
Hmm.
exciting part of doing that family learning together. So I know I'm
Yeah, and
excited
it
for
can be done too in a co-op group,
yes,
where a
that's right.
co-op group gets together and they each have a soldier to research, or maybe in pairs they research it, and then they
Yeah.
make a final presentation of their work to the homeschool group. And so there's different ways that students can put together the product. Quite often they will make a scrapbook out of this, out of the research, and I've seen just some incredible work from students on that. They can do a video. They can create a portfolio as well too. So there's a variety of different ways that they can put together what they've researched, and then yeah, it's great to present that to a homeschool co-op.
That would be a really nice option for it.
Hmm.
Um, so you've got one more little giveaway you wanted. This one's a little bit more special, and we're only going to give it away to one person. But why don't you share what that is? Because that's a little bit about the Google Classroom course you've got coming up.
Yeah, so the Canadian history or Canadian Civics course, the original form was the workbook and digital resources through Google Drive version, and that's still available. It's been a very successful, the most successful course that we offer. And I've now adapted those resources to be able to be completed through Google Classroom paperlessly, and it's very interactive. And Google Classroom is a very well organized system for administering a course. And so students, they have everything outlined very clearly in terms of a resource and all the different accompanying resources they need to complete a particular topic. It takes them through step by step through the whole process. And so just changed everything to offer a Google Classroom version of Canadian Civics. And so for one lucky person today, they will get a free subscription for one of their children to this course. And so
Okay.
I have a Canadian Civics trivia question. And my question here is this is the first one to respond will get this. What is the official name of Canada's electoral system?
Okay, and I'm just going to pop
Okay.
in there about, I see somebody asked a question, what age group does this cater to? And I'm not, and I think she's talking, or he went up there when you were talking about the Google. So what age group does that cater to, the Canadian Civics course?
Canadian Civics course is typically grade 9 and 10. If you do feel that your son or daughter is moving along very well in grade 8, then by all means that course could be completed in grade 8, because it is an open credit, so it's not a highly academic course. It's more of a information-based course in terms of how Canada's government works. And so typically grade 9 and 10, but there are a lot of grade 8 students who would be comfortable completing it as well.
Hmm. All right, so then, so say that question again. What, you go ahead and say it. I know it was
What
about
is the
our.
official name of Canada's electoral system?
What is the official name of Canada's electoral system? I'm not even sure if I know that one. I'm gonna have to collect my. I feel like, is it a common name that's said, um, like in news or in like, is it a commonly known name, or is it one of those names that isn't necessarily talked about in general?
There's actually two names for it. There's one that's the official, one is more of the informal. It is, when people hear it quite often, oh yeah, that's what it is. But I like, if you're watching the news, you would hear that on there, but it's not super common necessarily. But
Huh.
my guess is that once people hear it, that would ring a bell.
I feel like I know what it is. I'm not going to say it right now. I'm going to let somebody. I'm going to let somebody guess it, but I am curious to know the answer. And when somebody guesses it, and we've got the answer, then I'll. Then we'll be sure to let everybody know what that answer is. And whether you're listening to this, just because we've got certainly you that are watching live right now, and then we've got other people that are watching this as a recording. So either one, we will have the answer. And did we get an answer in there yet, Christine? I'm just looking through the comments a little bit here. All right, so I don't see anything there as far as an answer.
There is. I do see the correct answer, which I think I'll accept that one, sure. And so it's called first past the post, which is technically known as single member plurality. But first past the post is completely fine. That's also what it is known. So basically, the way this works is that Canada, in a federal election, which could be happening soon, actually, is divided up, of course, into 338 ridings. And from each riding, of course, comes one representative, one MP, member of parliament. And in order for a representative to get elected, they have to cross the finish line first. And that's known as, or basically they have to get the most votes. They don't need a majority of the votes. They simply have to cross the finish line first. And if they get, 41% of the votes and the rest of the votes are split up between 5 other candidates, they still have the most votes, and so they would become the member of parliament from that riding. And so it's a traditional system based on the British parliamentary model, an effective system, but of course, there's been discussion about possibly changing to another electoral system, something like proportional representation that is better represents all the votes. But that's a lot of change to actually, get the electoral system changed within Canada. It would be tough to do. But first past the post or single member plurality is the correct answer.
So first past the post, and I get that now that you explained it. So the first, yeah, and that's a little bit like how we talk about a majority and a minority government, right? Because right now we have a minority government,
yes,
because they federally, because they only got they actually didn't get. You described that, Mike. I'm trying to, now that I've got this concept out there, it's a minority government because they got the most
under
votes,
50%
but they didn't
of the
get the most seats.
Yeah.
Right?
So they got under 50% of the seats, and so that's a minority government. And then that can make it more challenging to rule, because they need to, of course, to cooperate with other political parties.
Yeah.
Now, there's a benefit in that too, is that a government cannot simply do what they want. They have to get others to cooperate. Whereas if there's a majority government, certainly things can be pushed through very quickly, but that means that there's not always enough, discussion about these different things with the other parties, because the party, of course, the majority party holds all the power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's some good learning. Nothing I've done with my kids yet, but I suppose they're around that age, or at least my older one, where we can start getting into that. Because I don't know, yeah. I know basic stuff, just being living in this country, right? But I could use a little bit more learning on our government system for sure. Okay, so that woman, I'm assuming it's a woman, how presumptuous of me, that person. Now we can't actually see your name because it doesn't show it in StreamYard here. But Christina's going to go on to Facebook and she can see who it is there. So Christine will just message you with that and with the details on how we'll get you set up with that course.
Great. Yeah. As soon as I get that information, then whoever wins, I'll be happy to explain how everything works, and I'll be in contact with you once I have your information.
Mm-hmm. Great. Sounds good. Well, I think we are going to wrap that up there. It was great to have you, Mike. It was actually just great to have the conversation just on for me personally. So got myself a little bit more educated on history, and it was really wonderful to hear really hear about that quote. That makes history a little bit more relevant and easy, even as I'm kind of teaching my kids, or I should say even more getting resources to teach my kids, but guide my kids along in learning about history. That's a great, just a great quote that I'm going to keep in mind for that. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us on history, as well as just your Christian viewpoint on history, which is excellent to have for this as well. So thank you all for joining us live and on the video when you're watching this as a recording. Please feel free to still comment. We come back to these and we like to, so if you have any questions that come up, or and then you can also go over to Mike's Facebook page, which is, well, you can search it, Creating History Homeschool, I believe is something with the name of it, right?
Yeah,
on
if they
Facebook.
just search
So
Creating History. Yep.
Yeah, you'll find it.
So
right?
yeah, Creating History Homeschool. If you search that, then you'll find that on Facebook. And creatinghistory.net is my own website.
Is your own website? Yes, right. Yep. So and maybe and she already did that. Look at how efficient she is. My background professional back there. She's already got the Creating History link in there. Great. Well, thank you very much. And
thank you very much.
Mike,
really
you enjoy your day today?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. I enjoyed this for sure. And yeah, I appreciate you showing interest in history and seeking to really delve into how important it is within a faith context. It's I truly believe that history is integral to our need for a savior. And we think about heading into Easter now, and we're celebrating the start of hope for us, right? That there is hope because we do have a savior. And so when we look at history from that perspective, it's incredibly important.
Yeah, and we didn't even plan this specifically thinking that Easter was coming up, but it really works perfect for that. We got Easter coming up in a few days, and gives us all a little bit of a different look on that. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Bye for now.
Take care.